www.OGHUSKEYRADIO.com, broadcasting live from the east side of Los Angeles, worldwide. Original defenders of hip-hop. But like I said, with having this outlet, we can reach out to other people, and I definitely like organizations like this, and we thank you guys for coming through. But can you guys introduce yourselves individually first?
Hi, again, my name is Melissa Rechiga. I'm a living descendant from the families that were violently displaced for the Dodgers Corporation by the City of Los Angeles, the County of Los Angeles, with the assistance of the Housing Authority and the Sheriff's Department. I'm also a direct descendant of the Rechiga family, which is usually recognized or identified as the woman that's being dragged out by the 4 police officers. That's my family. And so I'm here to speak on behalf of them and the communities that existed and the families, and hopefully tell their story with justice as we struggle for acknowledgement, reparations, community centers, and much more.
Denzel Montalvo, also too a descendant of the people of Palo Verde, La Loma, and Bishop. We're here to give a voice to the people that never had that voice, to bring attention and awareness to the communities that are currently being gentrified, and also to search for the reparations like Melissa was saying, and also bring some type of more of an understanding of the history and the preservation of our history from the point of view of the people who actually lived and were born and raised there.
Buriedundertheblue.com is where you guys could find all that information. When was the organization founded?
The organization was founded in 2019.
Who are you guys? Are the only 2 people that are the founders, or were the other people involved?
Well, we're equally co-founders of it, and as well, my mother serves as a board member on our board.
And what year was that? That was 2019.
Correct.
Why did it take so long to found the organization? Because what years are we talking about? Because it's before Dodger Stadium was built.
Correct.
Okay, so why did it take so long to found the organization?
Well, that's a tough question, because it has to do with a lot of our history, not only the history of the 3 communities, but the history of baseball in general. A lot of people today are just fans, right?
Yes.
But they really don't have an understanding of what the history is. Baseball is rooted in racism.
Hold the mic, get close to the mic.
Yeah, baseball is rooted in racism, right? And I think people don't stop because we'll say we're anti-racist, but then you're participating in these events. This changed the culture of the city, and almost brown folks actually helped erase the story because they became partners with the Dodgers in it, right, in the city. And this started, when we look back at our 3 communities, this was like 1920, 21. Most of our people came from the same region of Mexico, understanding that when they arrived here, they had a good opportunity to own a home, a piece of the American dream, only to find out later in 59, when we had what was called today Black Friday. So it's definitely has taken a while, but I think the elders have come around to understand and embrace the younger generations, which is like mine and Melissa's generation, to finally speak out, to bring truth to the 3 communities, and to change the negative narrative that, even in Chicano studies, it's a negative. They call the slums or the Shangri-La.
When you say that baseball is rooted in racism, I know what you're talking about, but I just, for people that maybe that don't know, I don't want to go too into it, but if you could just give examples or something, because if you say something like that, you have to defend it, you know what I mean?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. I mean, you look at baseball in its entirety, right? So first of all, you were never in. Every time we talk about history in baseball, you're either breaking through something, and you got to think about that concept like Jackie Robinson, right? You're not welcome if you're breaking in, and then when you break in, you're being allowed to be part of something. And when you look at the baseball system, with any sports system, you're literally being traded like slaves, and it's based upon your ability to run, hit the ball, and then when you're no good no more, what do they do to you? They cancel you out, right? No more money. And also it brings that sense of you don't really have your life if you actually see these contracts. And this is where we get into like that Fernando stuff, right? But it's just that negative history. You're not wanted, but you do make up, like the Dodger Stadium, Latinos make up a huge portion of the population, but have no clue to the root of baseball and how they play that factor in racism.
Yeah, anyone, please look up the Jackie Robinson story on anything. Even if it's a 30 for 30, just look it up and what that man had to go through. And to be celebrated, but celebrating what? That the stuff he went through is like so minimal. Like they make it look minimal, I should say. And like now we celebrate. Oh, he did this, he did that. But it was that structure that he had a breakthrough, was the structure they built to keep it. So like I said, I just want to like put that out there because people might be, oh, that's it, or just certain comments that people might not understand.
Right, but it's important to also listen clearly. What does the word break? What does break mean? And if you're breaking, again, that means not wanted. Because if you're really wanted, you'd be invited in. But you're not being invited. It's always documented. It's always said that, right? That we break the glass ceiling. The women, he broke the color line. This and that. So that means not wanted.
So the where they were neighborhoods of Palo Verde, La Loma, and Bishop.
Yes.
I don't know if I read it or if I saw it in one of the films or one of the docs, but it was the only section they were allowed because redlining was huge back then too, right?
Correct.
So then that was even if you were Mexican coming in or whatever, you weren't allowed to buy in any of the other areas.
There was actually covenants that prevented people of color from owning property. It was illegal to own property. So that's why these three communities are so important, because we were actually able to obtain home ownership. And I think a lot of times our community doesn't understand that, because that's not the case in our current time. So if you didn't have to live through that, sometimes you're disconnected from understanding the people that paid the way for that and had to deal with the brunt of the hardship to make that way for us.
I say devil's advocate because I try to present the questions that nobody really will ask. But is it kind of like it didn't really? I grew up a Dodger fan. Like it was the best memories I have with my father. Rest in peace. So, like, do you encounter that a lot where like automatically I'm just gonna, for a person like me, will just shut it down? Like, I'm not trying to hear this. Like, my experience is not your experience. Is that kind of what you guys deal with?
And get over it. However, at the same time, a lot of the same people that are saying that, they themselves are even having trouble paying rent, staying in their community, or know someone that's on the verge of eviction. So it's kind of like, how can you say that while simultaneously feeling the effects of gentrification knocking on your door? And so we often challenge them and say, well, you wear your Dodger jersey when they come to evict you and take you out your home or your family.
Okay, then what is gentrification then? For just simply put, so people that maybe don't know what it is.
Gentrification is something where they come in and they start changing the interior of the community by saying upgrades or revitalization, putting in things that normally we wouldn't have had before, maybe things that we had even asked for before from the city, like stop signs, better lights, more funding for the schools, and all of a sudden now they're doing those things, but not with the ideal of us benefiting from them. It's also with the ideal of the next people that are going to come in that can afford to pay the high rents.
So when we're getting things fixed, is it they're fixing it to raise the taxes or to run you out, or what's the ideal, or what's the thinking behind that? Because if I'm as a homeowner and I'm saying, hey, put up a stop sign, and they put it, I'm like, man, I've been asking for this stop sign since 1983. Now that it's getting done, I have to look at it like, why did it take so long? Or
well, I think you have to look at it. Are you a homeowner or are you a renter? It's kind of, because that changes, right? Like, have you been here? Are you going to stay here? And the more likelihood of you staying here to enjoy, I guess, the upgrades or the benefits or these new things that are coming in is more likely than somebody who's going to rent, because it's the potential is for somebody like an owner to raise, right? To want to have the incentive to raise because now the community's upgrading.
So is gentrification good for a homeowner?
I guess that's a like another difficult question.
I think it's a color question. I think it's a race question, because when we did the study in 2011, and this was Echo Park, a lot of people were like, I'm a homeowner, right? And we own property in Echo Park. And so most of the homeowners felt safe. This was until your markets were taken away from you. This is until your neighbors were taken away with you. They were replaced with white people. And white people were the ones that did not like your mariachi music. They did not like your parties. It was a total cultural change to the point where people were saying, Why are the cops coming now? Why are we getting service? Why can't we have open containers, but they're sipping wine on the corner of the street? So these things started changing where you could see that it was a racist push thing. And I grew up in Echo Park, so I went through the whole process of how a city works to eradicate people, just like they did in Palo Verde, La Loma, and Bishop. Most people will look at it and say, hold on, this was like the gang injunctions. There was
The
so many
racist gang
things.
injunctions.
The
yes.
race, it all ends up in racist, and they end up in court to be unconstitutional on our people.
Yeah, and the reason why I was getting into the gentrification so that people now, if you say you can't relate, then you're seeing it firsthand. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that's anywhere, I think, in Los Angeles. That I think
There's no stone left unturned.
Yeah. Did Echo Park lose out on the gentrification? I'm saying as the people, is there anything like...
They were no different than what happened in Palo Verde, La Loma, and Bishop. So if you were rich and you were able to move in there, right? And like everyone says, well, you know, Grandpa bought the house at $20,000. So now you're a millionaire overnight, right? That money's no good to you anymore, right? So people were kind of like saying, well, we've got money, but where do you go? What we found is a lot of people were trying to get back into Echo Park with that money, but no realtor would sell to them now. And then you started seeing what we call green gentrification, right? And this is the beautification of a park. As a brown person, even me in elected office, when I try to talk about, hold on, all this money is being used in the name of brown kids, but you're gentrifying the area where the rent is too high for them. Who was this actual plan being put in for? That's a legitimate question. But we back those things up because they feed them to us like, hey, a new park. And we're thinking, well, shit, they never gave us a park before. So we support it, but we never stop to ask ourselves this. Can I afford to be in Los Angeles? And if I can't afford to be here, then where will I go? That taxpayers' money that's the homeowner is being used against them.
What can we do to stop it?
You know, it's a tough one to talk about. But I think, you know, the first thing is bring awareness. That's number one. We need to understand what our communities are about. We need to understand how our elected officials and hold them accountable until we can change the system. That's part of it. It's one thing that most Latinos do not look at is how can we integrate? Far too often we hear in the community, and maybe a lot of the listeners will understand this, that I don't want to get involved in that. If you don't get involved, they'll make the decisions for you. And this is the reasons why you don't have opportunities and you don't have that rent that you can afford, let alone a job. And you know, there's so much stuff happening in our communities right now.
What about zoning? Can we do anything to fight zoning? Like when zoning changes, or you know what I mean? Like, do we have to, or should we hire somebody to?
But I think this.
That?
Oh, sorry.
No. I think zoning. Look, zoning is something that is also controlled by the legislation, right, and through policy. Right now, we're working on a project where we have something called rent stabilization that has to do a lot with the zoning and how you have protections as renters. And what people are barely finding out is that even in the policy of our city charter, you have a racist bill. The commission has no renters in it, but it allows a homeowner to be part of it. So renters and landlords cannot be part of the commission who make the decisions and advise the city council, but a homeowner can. So you ask yourself this, who has more in common, a renter or a homeowner? So you're always going to get policies that are going to be against a renter, as we can see today. So that's why it's important in zoning that we got to be very careful, because those words of adaptive reuse,
Yes.
And even in gentrification, key terms are revitalization. Those are signs for a brown person, or we made a book one time that said, if you hear these words in planning, you're being targeted like Palo Verde, La Loma, and Bishop. Because to revitalize, why? Did you ask for it? Most people didn't. So who's doing the revitalization, and are you included in it if you weren't part of it? Most of the Raza doesn't even know because they don't attend these meetings.
What's the meetings they could start? City council or?
You know, I always recommend this. Your neighborhood councils. If you're in the city of Los Angeles, you have a local neighborhood council that you could run. It's an elected position. They have funding to do projects to educate people. So that's one thing, like in the Lincoln Heights Neighborhood Council, that's what we started in our neighborhood. Integrate people in there. You don't want to be part of it, but then you're going to have to sit back and you can't complain. You need to be part of the solution to push these discussions, because nobody's having them.